Hi, my name is Julia M. Spencer. I'm a real estate advisor, investor, and your number one source for real estate advice online. Thanks for having checked out my channel. And before we get into the topic of this video, make sure you check out my website. I'm in the process of redoing it, so it's going to look different here really soon. But also just subscribe to my YouTube channel so you might be notified when I bring out new videos. Now the topic of this video is what to do when you can't quiet title. So can't quiet title, what do you do? So this video came about from a recent trip that I took to Las Vegas, Nevada. I went there to several auctions, 3 of them actually. You may have seen me advertise that on my Facebook. Actually it wasn't even on my channel. Because I was meeting there with my graybeard investor friends, and of course I trail along them and try to absorb and learn as much as possible, try to see how they do things differently from the way I do it, and hopefully learn something and bring you all that knowledge. And I learned something very, very important. There is one video I did in Las Vegas. It was at the Venetian in Las Vegas. Now, if you haven't watched that video, you could still get the gist of this video, but it might be better if you go back to that video. And that has to do with mortgages and which kinds of mortgages are actually not erased during a tax sale foreclosure. That's a very important point, but this is kind of sort of a little bit the continuation of that video. So let's just give you a little bit of background. So what is a quiet title even, and what does it mean when you can't quiet title? So in my past education and in my audiobooks and all the stuff that I've put out, I always have recommended that when you do buy tax sale foreclosure investments, it's always advisable, especially if the value of the property is very high and you got it for very cheap, to do a quiet title. And that just means that all subsequent claims by anybody out there that are still kind of lingering, or maybe there's some descendants that haven't voiced their need to get the property yet, or maybe there's some liens out there, all of those will be quieted so that you are the legitimate owner of the property. Because what is happening when you go to a tax sale foreclosure, you are getting sort of a flawed title. It's not a perfect title. It's not the same kind of title that you get when you go to regular sales closing from real estate, where you get a warranty title, or maybe you get a trust deed, or you get a security deed. By the way, the conveyance method is different for each state, and I can explain that in another video. But in any case, you don't have a really good title. So what you do is you go to perfect the title. And for that, most likely, unless you are an attorney yourself, you probably should go ahead and hire an attorney, and they will perform this quiet title action for you. They'll basically sue the whole world for quieting the title on your property for you. So anybody and everybody that has a claim on this property will be quieted. So from that point onward, once of course the judge signs the final order, you are the legitimate owner, and nobody else can ever make a claim against it. So what has happened in this past trip to Las Vegas, I've discovered that some of my friends have ran into this problem where they were not able to quiet the title. Now normally quieting the title is a pretty straightforward process. You hire an attorney, you give them a couple $1,000s, depending on how much they charge. Also kind of depends on the property and how many things it has on its title. Once they do the property record search, they'll let you know that, the attorneys will. And you wait the subsequent couple of months, or however long it takes, then you wait a little bit more to get on the docket for your court and for the judge, and then your attorney hopefully shows up for you, so you don't have to go to court in person, and eventually they'll sign the order stating that, okay, you have really done in the last 6 months anything and everything you could possibly do to find any and all claimants on this property, and you've either satisfied these claims or you are not able to reach any of them, and you've done basically all the basic steps that an attorney does to quiet this title. And I'm not going to go through what they actually do. That's something you need to discuss with your attorney. I'm not an attorney, so I can't tell you specifically. Now, if you want me to make a video specifically on what they do, I can do that. Again, just always understand that's not legal advice, because I'm not an attorney. I'm not licensed to give you that advice. Everything I talk about here is experience-based. But the point I'm trying to make is what happens when you can't quiet the title. Normally, of course, the process, like I said, is pretty straightforward, but at one point, there is instances where you can't quiet the title, and this has happened to my graybeard investor friends out in Las Vegas. And how did this happen? For that, you need to watch the previous video, and but what has happened basically is that they have bought at tax sale foreclosures properties that were auctioned off, that had mortgages on them, that were underwritten by Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. Those are federal government underwriters, and these are basically federal mortgage loans. And since federal courts and federal entities have usually a higher ranking than local state courts, being the ones that are conducting the tax sale, they have a priority. So even though a mortgage normally is erased by those tax sales, if it's a Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae loan, they will not be. There's something in place that's called a conservatorship, and please Google this because I haven't even Googled it yet, but this is what my friends tell me. There's a law in place, a conservatorship, that basically conserves and keeps in place those mortgages that are underwritten by Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And so what do you do in those cases when you can't quiet the title? Well, there's three things that you can do. The first is you basically bleed the property. And what does that mean? This is the actual term that was used by my graybeard investors. So I'm going to use the same term, bleeding a property. That just basically means that you're going to take as much as possible from this property as you can before you get foreclosed on. Now, why would you get foreclosed on if you bought a tax sale foreclosure? Well, if the mortgage stays in place, somebody has to pay it. Likely the taxes were not paid, and that's why it went to auction in the first place. That's how you got it. But if the mortgage cannot be erased through that tax sale, it's still in place and somebody has to make the payment. Very likely the original owner is not making the payment because they haven't even paid the taxes, right? So the mortgage is there. So the mortgage company is going to get wind that you are the new owner, and they're going to start sending you letters and messages stating like, hey, this mortgage is in default, you need to pay because it looks like you're the owner now. And this happens frequently in states, of course, where there's no escrow account required. The reason I just found out about this now, because most of my work that I do is right here in Georgia, in the state of Georgia. We have escrow requirements. There's escrow companies that are being hired by mortgage companies specifically, and specifically for the reason to research and pay taxes. So these things are already taken care of on your behalf, but not all states function that way. And so I haven't really operated in states where there's no escrow requirements. So that's why I didn't find out about it. But that being said, let's say you did buy a tax lien, and let's say there is a mortgage, and now the mortgage company is asking you to pay for it. What do? So the first step is, like I said, you bleed the property, which means you will try to get as much rent as possible out of that property while it is in your possession. That, of course, assumes that after the tax sale you have possession. That means if you bought it at the tax sale, somebody still lives in there, and now all of a sudden you're responsible for the mortgage, you'll have to actually evict the current tenant or owner. And that is, of course, providing that there is no redemption period, because in a lot of states during the redemption period you can't do anything. I know I'm probably totally confusing you, but if you're following my channel or have followed my channel, you will be able to follow this a little bit. Basically, when you purchase a property at a tax sale, and let's say it's a deed sale, so there is no redemption period, you could theoretically take possession right away. If somebody still lives in there, you still have to go through a process of eviction of the current owner or occupant. That may take a couple months depending on your jurisdiction, But after that, you have possession. So what you'll do, you'll start immediately renting that property or using it in some way to generate money and try to get as much as possible out of it before the mortgage company forecloses on you. You know, the mortgage foreclosure process takes another 6 to 12 months, depending on how quick the mortgage companies are. And so, and you can, of course, take them to court and extend this even further. That is, if you think that the income that you generate through this bleeding process is going to enable you to pay for an attorney to keep the thing occupied in courts as long as possible. But just remember, if the property generates about $1,000 a month in rent, and you can keep it tied up in the courts for about 2 years, you can make $24,000 on a property that you maybe paid only a couple $1,000s for. Even if you lose it at the end, you have bled it basically. You have basically taken everything out of it that you possibly could before the mortgage company forecloses on you. Now, mortgage foreclosure process isn't as scary as it sounds. You are actually not the person that took out this mortgage, so this is not going to show up on your credit report. This may show up in some court documents or in a county records or city records, wherever this mortgage was taken up on, and probably in the county records, wherever the property records are, but that's no big deal. You know, that's not going to count against you in terms of your credit rating, and I wouldn't worry about it too much. So that's the first step of what you can do when you can't quiet the title. Let's talk about the second. So the second one, kind of, I've already alluded to, it's basically stalling. You're trying to keep the process of foreclosure with the mortgage company in courts as long as possible, and you can do this by extending court dates, asking a judge for a leave of absence or whatever, and work with your attorneys on this and ask them what can be done to extend this process for years. I have my investors, my gray beard investors, tell me that they have kept some of these properties in the courts for 3 to 4 years, and they have been successfully able to collect rent for 3 to 4 years until the mortgage company foreclosed on them eventually. And even so, they were quite successful in generating a lot of cash. This is a property that they themselves don't have a mortgage on. They're not paying a mortgage. They paid a couple $1,000s for the tax deed or tax lien, whichever one, and maybe another $1,000 or $2,000 maybe for the eviction, maybe a little bit of remodel, but we're able to get that money back through the rent, as well as that rent also covered their attorney costs. So, you know, stalling is sometimes a good idea. You know, not trying to finish everything in the courts as quickly as possible might be a good idea sometimes. So what's the last thing that you can do when you cannot quiet the title? Well, it kind of goes with everything else in that if you have a property where you can't quiet the title, that you really can't sell it. Or else you have to really pretty much disclose to the new owner the flaws with the title, and that there's a mortgage and the mortgage is trying to foreclose. So you're going to have a hard time finding a buyer that's willing to take on that kind of problem, especially if you're asking for full price. So you're going to keep it as a rental. So that's an okay strategy, but that's of course not going to last forever. Stalling's not going to work forever. Bleeding the property is not going to work forever. What you can do, however, is you can try to negotiate with the bank a deal, and you can do it in different stages. So let's say they have not foreclosed yet. Maybe they're thinking about foreclosing. They're starting to send you letters that they're planning on doing that. You can make them an offer, short sale offer basically. Make them an offer for a significant amount less than what the mortgage is, and kind of just argue with them, or not argue with them, but argue your point, the fact that if they were going to foreclose on you, and then they'll have to re-advertise it and pay for a realtor to advertise it and pay for their commissions, it's going to take them the same amount as giving you that low price up front, minus all of those costs. So make sure when you negotiate with banks, though, that you don't talk to the regular everyday clerk on the phone, whoever answers the phone. You really have to talk to somebody that has the decision power. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. Now, there's one last point that I wanted to just add as an add-on to this video. Another thing that you can do that I have seen my graybeard investors do actually in action And what they have done is they're, of course, very well aware when foreclosure is coming. And they keep that date on their calendar and very clearly understand that's the date that the mortgage company is going to foreclose, and then they're going to start the eviction process or whatever they're going to do. So they have those dates on their calendar. So what they do is they send contractors to the property a couple days prior and have the contractors strip the property completely from top to bottom. And I'm talking remove appliances, remove light fixtures, remove HVAC system, remove carpets, remove countertops, doors, anything and everything that can be unscrewed, minus the walls, even the windows if necessary. Remove everything and put everything in storage someplace. And then just wait for the foreclosure. Since the investor had possession of the property at the time that they removed all these things, stripped the property, it's their right to do so. There's nothing in the law that says that you can't do that to your property. So then foreclosure comes, of course. The property is given back to the mortgage company, because most likely nobody's either going to bid on it, or else if somebody's going to bid on it, they're going to bid on it for a very, very low price. Either way, it doesn't matter to you. You pretty much have to count with the fact that you're going to lose it at this time. So let's say that the property goes to somebody. Well, you just got a whole bunch of supplies that you can sell in the aftermarket. But let's say the property goes back to the mortgage company. Well, a mortgage company is going to send a realtor out there to assess what it's worth so they can list it in the regular market. I hope you're following me. At this point, you as the investor, you're watching all of this, you go to that realtor and make a really, really lowball offer, basically stating is like, this property's stripped, there's nothing in it, I have to put a lot of money into it to put it back into rental status. Give me a very, very low price. You basically are forcing the mortgage company to give you a low price if they didn't do it in the first step. And more times than not, the mortgage company at this point is going to be willing to give you a very low price with the recommendation of the realtor, of course, since they're going to be the ones that are going to give the mortgage company the assessed value, which is going to be much lower than the market value at this point. And you can buy the property that way for a cheap price. And once you have it, you got a whole shed full of supplies that you can put right back in there, and they're custom fitted. So I've never done this, but I'm sharing what I've learned from my gray-beard investors out west. So I hope this information was useful to you. Some of this will be incorporated in one of my ebooks here, audiobooks, soon. So don't miss it. Make sure you subscribe. And by the way, if you have a comment, please leave it. Also, if you have time, read the other people's comments and reply to them. If you can't reply, just read what other people say. I want you all to network, talk to each other, and help each other. And somehow this tax or foreclosure investing world, or real estate world in general, has been under this cloak of fog, and nobody wants to share any of their tricks and tips, but I'm here to change that. So please subscribe, juliamspencer.com, and subscribe at my YouTube channel, and drop me a message if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, feedback, criticism. I take it all, and I look forward to hear from you. Have a great day investing. Bye.
For your free guide to real estate investing, visit juliamspencer.com.